Hi everyone, welcome to Drawscapes. I'm Chris Tuccio. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to render your landscape design plans with colored pencils. Stick around. Hi everyone. So there's a variety of different tools that we can use to actually develop color on our landscape design plans. There's markers, there's colored pencils, there's pastels, there's watercolors. There's a variety of different mediums that are available. In this episode, I'm going to show you colored pencils. The reason that I start with colored pencils is they're the most forgiving, they're the easiest to use, and they're often the cheapest for landscape designers to buy. So without further ado, let's just get our materials ready and we'll throw it up in the air and let's get started. Okay, so what I've done before really we started anything is I just drew 4 different styles of trees. Now if you remember from some of my earlier videos, I did a variety of different how to draw ornamental trees in plans, and so these are just a random sampling of a few of them, and I'm going to try and show you a few ways in which we can render or draw in colored pencil using these examples of trees. And so I'll make sure, if you haven't already, I'll link in the description the videos that'll show you how to draw some of these types of trees. But essentially we have just a regular ornamental deciduous, we have a conifer, we just have again regular double bordered ornamental, and then something that could be either something like a shrub or even a tree with just a larger canopy on it. So each one I'm going to try and illustrate some different technique for rendering, and all in colored pencil. The colored pencils that I'm using are a mixture. Over the years I get some Prismacolor, some Stapler, so a variety of different ones, but Prismacolor is the one that I often use. So the first one that we're going to do is the upper left hand one, and these were done in ink and I let it dry a little bit before I started the coloring. And the first one is going to be called layering. That's the process that we're going to be using, is a layering. So when we're layering, basically what we're doing is we're putting sort of a base foundation for the tree and the color, and then we're coming back on top of it with more color in layers, and that's going to add complexity and depth to it. So I'm using a very light touch, and I'm just lightly, with a fairly light green, just coming over the top and just lightly putting down some color. So now colored pencils have, you know, a wax to them that binds the pigment, and so as you essentially are laying down color, you're going to get a little bit of a waxiness to it, and the harder that you push, the waxier it's going to look. And so I'm just putting down a very light layer, and this takes a little bit of time. Layering is one of the easiest ones to do well, but it does take some time because you're going very slowly and you're adding layer upon layer upon layer. And I'm putting very light pressure on to start. I could always put more pressure on. So I'm getting some of that color base down. And I move on to the other one. And each section I'm doing by itself. Each section I'm doing at a time. So one section, then I move on to the other section of this 3-portion one. You can see I got a little bit of bleed from my pen on one of these trees, but that's okay. I could kind of just work around that. Okay. Just keep going over here. Okay, so now that base layer is done, so I'm just going to go again a little harder now, just once it's done, just to add a little extra color to it. Looks like I need a little bit more pigment. And you don't have to worry about your pencil being super sharp. It doesn't have to be. It's okay, it's a little dull. It doesn't need to have a fine point as if you're drafting. You just want a light layer on top. Okay, so keep doing that. So then, now that you have your base, what you're going to do is you're going to come on top of it with another layer of color. I'm going to use a slightly darker green now. So it's just a little bit darker. You can see the difference between this is, what is this? I don't even say it has a name. This is sort of like a apple green, and this is a different style green for the Prismacolor. So now I'm going to go and I'm just going to come on top of it. Now I also have to think about the light levels because this is going to be slightly darker. So I'm going to assume my light is coming from this direction, so the bottom portion is going to be a little darker. So I'm going to start from the bottom portion and work my way up. And again, just light texture. I'm also going to do a little bit on the top, just like we would do stippling. Same thing on both other sections. Okay, and so now we have a nice green tree, and we could add, even if we wanted to, we could add little highlights of yellow, or if it had a particular flower, we can add little highlights of color for the flowers or fall color that it might be. I'm going to come just one last time with a slightly darker green. This is more of a grass green, and just going to do one last layer on the bottom, just to layer it in. A little more depth to it. And the thing about layering is it adds complexity by just one on top of another on top of another. And then you can come back with your others and blend over them. Makes it really nice. Really nice texture. And then I'm going to finally add one last layer back to my original green and just very lightly blend all this in. So very lightly coming in and blending it all together. Okay, that gives me a nice textured tree. Any sort of ornamental tree that's in my landscape that's not really a specimen, that'd be a nice rendering of it. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to more of a conifer, and here I'm going to do a little bit of burnishing. Okay, so that was layering. Now I'm going to be doing burnishing. And so for the burnishing, what we're going to do, I'm going to do a little darker now. I'm going to come with my lighter color. I'm going to use more of a woodier green, and I'm just going to go a little harder right off the bat. And a little harder right off the bat. A little more pressure to add a little bit of that waxier look to it. Okay? So I'm not going to be doing a lot of different layers. I'm just going to come and press a little bit harder right off the bat. And again, I'm going to assume here that my light level is coming in this direction. So this is going to be the slightly lighter look to the tree. This is going to be the lighter area. Okay, so I'm only going to be doing it in this upper right-hand portion of the tree. And I'm using about medium to medium-heavy pressure here. I'm not really bearing down. I'm not hurting myself, my hand, but I'm definitely adding a lot more pressure than I was with the layering. So then once I've done that, I'm going to go back to my darker green, and I'm going to do the same thing. Only on the bottom now. Okay, just like that. I'm going to add a little bit at the top. And I'm finally going to come back with that original green. Just slightly try and blend it in, just so there's a little bit of a blend to it, so it doesn't look so stark. Okay, like so. Okay, so that was a pretty quick burnishing. Now, we're going to do something where we'll do this tree and we'll do multiple colors. I'm going to move this up a little bit. So, just going to be a multicolored look. So, or can also be called sectioned. With these types of trees, you created with the branching these little sections, so you can do each of those just a little differently. And this is nice too because we have the entire border, this double border that forms around the edge, so we can do this in a really nice way. So you would want to choose essentially where your lighter colors would be, where your darker colors would be, and then how your border would interact with both of them. So I'm going to start with my lighter colors. I'm actually going to choose this to be kind of like more of a flowering, so I'm going to start with red. And this is going to be, the small sections are going to be red. So I'm just going to lightly, with my, almost like I'm layering, just a very light red over the top. And I'm just going to do that little small section there, and I'm going to come in and do the same thing over here. Like this. Then I'm going to come and do my lighter colors. So it's going to be my green here. Like so. And finally my darkest green, whichever one I wanted to use. Let's use this one. I'm in like this. Okay, and then finally, what you'll do is you can come back over the top. You want to make sure you remember which ones you used, and come back over the top and add from the center out more shading. So it'd be darker at the center, so you'd be a little heavier pressure, and then slowly fade it out. Okay, so slightly harder pressure, fade it out. Slightly harder pressure, and fade it out. And you do that for each one again. Adds a little bit more of a three-dimensionality to it. So I'm using medium pressure now. Same thing here. Medium pressure. And then lastly, my darker pressure with my top one. Okay, and then from there you can also start to blend. If you don't like the look of just the entire red, you could, if let's say that's a little too heavy for you, you don't like it, you can come back over with a little bit of green just to blend it so it's not as bright and heavy. Make it a little more muted, so I could do something like that. Or maybe you like the look of that and you want to add actually pops of red in other areas, you can do that. Some people don't like the look of just the stark multicolors, so they want to blend it a little more. So use your darkest color, like I'm doing, and just add a very light hatch over the top of everything. It'll just mute everything down just a little bit, like so. And then, once you're finally happy with the overall, you can decide to do the border however you want. And so the border can be a different green, it can be a color, it can be whatever particular color you want. I'm just going to do a light green over the top, just as a border. Really quickly. And there we have it. We have sort of a nice ornamental deciduous tree with some shading over the top, and we have it so that it represents a little pop of color within our landscape that we have overall. Okay, so that's a multicolored sectional. And so then lastly is sort of these odd varieties where we don't have just hard lines, we have a lot of smaller lines, and so there's some special ways that we can start to begin to render this. The first thing that I'll do is I'll grab just a lighter green. So I'm going to grab this green. I've kind of, actually, let me move to this green. I think that should be fine, the Prismacolor. And I'm just going to be putting a light wash, just as if I was layering, a light wash over the whole thing. Okay, just the same way that I did before with layering, just a light wash over the whole thing, very quickly. Nice light wash, and this one is going to be called a contoured one, just because we're going to be following the contours of the tree itself. And so then I choose a darker green, whichever one that is, and I simply start to render the bottoms of these edges, so like so, and I'm using medium pressure here. It might be very difficult to see as it's tough, but I'm just coming in, I'm just adding a little bit of texture over the top on the downside of these lines. Again, you have to identify a light source, so my light source is coming in this direction. Okay, so just doing that for all of them. And when you get to the edge, you'll do the opposite. You'll just come over the top of it. So you form sort of these little crinkles. So you're following the zigzags that you created, and you're just kind of highlighting them with the darker green, like so. And you do that over the top as well. Then you come back with your original green, whatever you used, and you'll just lightly wash it, just to put a nice another light wash coat on it, just to blend it all in. And it adds a little bit of depth to it. And you don't have to stop with just two colors. If you wanted to add pops of color, you can do so in the same way. You could add little hints of red, or let's say I wanted yellow. I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow to it, brighten it up a little. So I'm just coming in where these crinkles are, these zigzags, and just adding a little bit of yellow. Add a little pop of color, make it look a little nice. But every time you add a different color, you want to come back over the top afterwards with your original green, just to blend it in a little bit. Okay. And again, it's just a very light wash, just to blend it in. Okay, so 4 different trees, 4 different ways to render them in colored pencil. You know, you can practice, find different colors. What I always tell students is before you actually do something on your plan itself, do it off to the side, practice with it, make sure that you like it, and then transfer it to your plan for the purposes of real life. Okay, so you might like one over the other, you might be better at one over the other, but practice them. I guarantee you're going to get a lot better at it through time. Okay, if you like the content on the videos, make sure you subscribe. You'll get all the weekly videos each week, and you know, hopefully you keep practicing and learn landscape design. All right, thanks guys. See you at the next video.